Welcome to the very first episode of the No Fit Too Small podcast. My name is Jackie 𝘱𝘰. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications at No Fit Too Small, and I am so excited to introduce our first guests, Robin and Ryan Boudreau, the co-founders of No Fit Too Small. So thank you to Storyline Multimedia for sponsoring today's podcast, and let's just dive right in.
Gosh, you're really good at this.
Nailed that first intro.
That was the first time.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
I wouldn't have guessed.
I'm really excited.
We're excited. So thank you for doing this and leaning into this project.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here and helping to share the origin story of No Fit Too Small.
We'll do the best we can.
Let's start by just getting to know you guys a little bit. Tell me the story of Ryan and Robin. How did you meet?
You want to tee this one up?
Go for it.
Oh, gosh. Well, I was 15 years old. We were in high school, and he asked me to the dance. I was getting on the bus to go on a band trip, and he asked me to the winter carnival. And the rest was history. Right?
It's really romantic.
Well, we met
Wasn't
a little
it?
bit before that. It wasn't just a dance, but I mean, before we just spent a lot of time. I think it was always after sports. I was waiting for my ride, and Robin
I don't
would be
remember any of this.
kind of out waiting for a ride as well, and then we'd just be out there talking. And so really it just developed as a friendship with lots of conversation. I'm sure we were both interested in other people at the time for whatever reason. And then we just had way more conversation than I think we had with anybody else that we were interested in, and we realized, oh, this is kind of nice. And so that's how I think any long-lasting relationship should start, is with good conversation, and that's why we're still here, probably.
I did forget all of those parts.
Well, it's probably, I was thinking, Ryan, I haven't had a chance to actually sit down and really talk with you. I've just been the awkward person forcing you to dance on the golf course at all of the golf
Wow.
events. So maybe the dance was the memorable part for you, because that's
Yes.
when you first saw his moves.
That might have been it.
That would make a lot of
There
sense.
were some moves.
I've seen them. They're pretty great. So tell us just a little bit. I mean, you guys met really young, and, your life started really young.
It
So
did.
tell us a little bit
I
about...
think anybody close to me would say that when I have a vision, I'm on a mission, right? And I set my mind to something. There's probably not anything that's going to stop me. And so it was my goal. I was going to marry my high school sweetheart. That was the plan. Fortunately, we had a strong foundation and a friendship in that relationship. But he was a year older than I was. And so he left and went to the University of Minnesota. I stayed in our hometown of Marshfield, Wisconsin, obviously, for my senior year, but visited frequently. And so in that time, the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus really also became home. And so after that senior year, I also attended the University of Minnesota. One, he was there. Two, it felt like home. And they had a family marriage therapy program, which was my interest. So
Oh, okay.
kind of had everything I was looking for. So then we were together at the University of Minnesota as well.
So is that what you studied?
I did. I went to school for family marriage therapy.
I did not know
You didn't
that.
know that?
Your
Yeah.
whole life.
So it all comes
preparing
from-
for this.
Correct.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's
I
great.
was actually in a conversation with Leighton Smith years ago, and we were sitting in a coffee shop downtown Iowa City, and he had asked that. He said, what did you go to school for? And I said, family marriage therapy. He's like, okay. And what was your career in? I said, sales, right? Medical device sales, working with physicians, working with hospitals. And then lo and behold, all those years later, losing Beau, it did really come full circle and prepare us for No Fit Too Small.
That's amazing. I did not know that.
I get therapized a lot.
Right. Right.
And Ryan, what did you go to school for? And what are you doing now?
Well, I went to Minnesota. So in high school, I fell in love with science. And so Minnesota had a great genetic cell biology and development program. And so I went over there. And I always joke, I tried to juke left going to Minnesota, juke right coming to Iowa. But Robin just kept chasing me. So I knew it worked out. So yeah, science nerd. That's what I do.
I love that. And so what's your career journey looked like since then?
In the summers, we would go back to Marshfield. And so we were very fortunate to have a genomics research center in Marshfield. So I was able to go there and do some research internships that then pointed me to labs at Minnesota to join, which then the PI in that lab, the leader of the lab, suggested I go to Iowa for graduate school as an option. And so I've been here ever since. I've been in Iowa for 20 plus years, came here for graduate school, and then since have started my own lab.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
I don't ask a lot of questions.
I was going to say that a lot of that's probably over my head.
Yeah. So like I was saying, my brain is all sciencey, and this type of discussion, this is a little out of my wheelhouse for the day to day.
Well, that's okay. That's why we're glad to host conversations like this and create space for that, so that conversations we don't normally have can be had. That's our goal with the podcast. So
You're not the typical scientist, though. You know, like you're a little bit more outgoing.
Yeah.
You've got a lot to say, actually.
Sometimes.
Uh-huh.
What about early married life? You know, skip forward a little bit. What were the early days like starting a family together?
Well, we were actually married for quite a while before we decided to start a family. I think my mom had really instilled in me that we should travel. We should go experience. We should do all of the things before starting a family. And I remember vividly a flight home from St. Kitts. And I got a message from my first college roommate announcing that she was pregnant. And it was in that exact moment that I was like, okay, I'm 30. I think I'm ready, right? But we got married when I was 24. And so we had really spent that time traveling and just exploring and decided right then and there, okay, we're ready.
What was the best trip you took before kids?
Bora Bora.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yes.
I wasn't sure if you
That was
agree,
the purpose
but okay.
of the trip, I think.
Well, yes. I mean, I had a vision and a mission for that too, right?
Yeah.
I wanted Bella to have a great story.
Well, it was our 5th wedding anniversary as well, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
So I won't ask more questions about that then, if that's supposed to be part of Bella's story.
That's all right.
So Bella.
Yes. So Bella was conceived in Bora Bora. Guess we've already laid that out. And she was born in 2011. Easy pregnancy, I would say. When we went in for the gender check, my girlfriend Abby did that scan. It was, an evening in the office. We were totally alone. Again, at the time, I would have called that a gender check. And Abby was just going to tell us whether or not we were having a boy or a girl. And immediately found out she was a girl. So that was super exciting. I remember asking Ryan in the car on the drive home how he felt about that, right? Like, did you want a boy? And he's just like, well, I guess we got the girl out of the way, right? We know you wanted a girl. But the rest of Bella's pregnancy was pretty easy, and she came 3 weeks early. She was just really special. Easy delivery, easy everything.
Yeah.
She's still probably one of the easiest kids.
She's
Very sweet soul.
Mm-hmm. She is, and she's such a good helper at all of our events too.
Oh, we're working on that. We're working on the helping part.
Great.
She's like a little grown up already.
Yeah.
Yeah,
she's
is.
Wise beyond her years.
She is. Well, she's how old now? 13?
She's 13.
Hard to think, yeah. It's hard to remember that she's 13 because she seems like she's 16.
Well, and she's taller than me at this point, like just by a little bit. She's my size. So when I go to hug her, I'm like, this is so strange. Where's the little girl I like to snuggle?
Yeah, no, those years go fast.
Way fast. I feel really old even saying that. Yeah.
So how old was Bella when you decided to grow your family?
So Bella was probably a year and a half at the time that we decided we should start trying for number 2.
We were always targeting to have two years in between children-ish.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And getting pregnant the second time really wasn't difficult either. And again, I think I was more nauseous with Beau, but an easy pregnancy, so to speak. And it was the same deal. My best friend Abby says, you know what, we'll take you up to the clinic in Cedar Rapids. We'll do the gender check. We'll find out if you're going to have another girl or a boy. And that night we were laying there. I was laying there on the table. Ryan was sitting next to me and Abby on the other side, and immediately see that he's a boy. Like, first thing we see is his penis. And I'm like, oh my goodness.
Ryan, how proud were you?
I knew it was going to be out a lot the rest of his life.
Oh, wow.
Had he made it.
Welcome to the Boudreaux. Anyway, so I really never imagined having a boy. It wasn't on my bucket list to have a boy. And so in that very moment, if I'm very honest, I was just taken back by, oh my goodness, what am I going to do with a boy? But just as quickly as we learned he was a boy is when we also saw that there was many other things wrong. You want to speak to that a little bit?
Well, yeah. So, we see that he's a boy, and obviously you have that emotion right away. So getting back to the fact of a girl and a boy, that's kind of, my view, at least, of what the goal was, is have a girl for a Robin and a boy for me to turn into a man and play sports with and do stuff like that. It's a lot of fun. I grew up with all brothers, so I only knew the boy side of things.
Sure.
But was totally welcome to having a daughter and knew that would be a fun journey as well. And then, brother and sister would have each other, so they have their little support. Obviously, you can keep expanding your family. A sister wants a sister and a brother wants a brother, but I think we were kind of set on having 2 children. And so, so when I saw that Beau was a boy, obviously I was excited because I was like, wow, here's our little perfect story continuing, right? High school sweethearts, and we got through all the times of getting through college and all that and starting our family, and everything seems to be going perfect. And then that's when you see all of a sudden the scan continued and we saw Beau's skull, and we knew right away that
He wasn't okay.
something was wrong. And just the shape of the skull, the lack of a skull, other features there that were very clear that there's something not right. And that's when you just kind of go into a mode where, I don't know, your brain kind of stops and you sort of shut down for a brief moment until you can reboot and think about where things are going to go from there.
Yeah, what were you feeling right in that moment? So you could see it. There weren't words exchanged with the medical staff at that point. You could see it right away.
Well, nobody was there, right?
Okay.
So all the physicians were gone. We were in an empty office. So Abby had just taken us up there. There wasn't anybody to ask. And I think in that moment, she would say she felt really helpless because she also knew, probably even more than we knew, what was wrong. The skull was obvious, but there was a lot more than that as well. And so we just remember quietly leaving the office. We had left Bella with Miss Katie, her care provider, and so swung through North Liberty, picked up Bella, and I think that was actually one of the greatest gifts, the most comforting gifts, was to be able to go home to Bella, right? So you think about the families who are experiencing this and don't have a healthy child at home. She was that comfort for us, or for me that night. And then it's just the waiting game. And so it's the anxiety of, my goodness, now tomorrow I need to call the University of Iowa. I need to, really fight to be seen, and wait for some more answers.
Yeah, what was that night like when you went home without answers, not sure what the next steps were?
Just a very numb, helpless feeling, really.
Yeah, obviously, just a lot of tears.
Yep.
A lot of kind of like, well, I thought everything was going perfect. Why? What's happening now? Why us?
Well, and you think about that's 12 years ago, 11 to 12 years ago. And at that time, nobody really talked about miscarriage, infant loss, pregnancy loss, anything of the sort. Celebrities slowly started opening that conversation, but I felt very alone. I felt like, my goodness, nobody's ever talked about this. And it wasn't, a miscarriage. There was a lot more wrong here. And so just not really knowing who I can even turn to ask questions, and feeling like I literally needed to wait until I was sitting with Dr. Mawson so that she could tell me something.
Yeah, I was just thinking, how would you even know what steps to take the next day? I mean...
No, I called the hospital the next morning, the University of Iowa, and Rachel, Dr. Mawson, was in procedures and surgeries, and so she actually wasn't able to call me back until 3:30 or 4 o'clock that afternoon. And she was very apologetic. I'm crying, I'm scared. And so the soonest they could get us into fetal genetics. So the scan with Abby was on a Monday night. I called the university on Tuesday. She urged fetal genetics to get me in on Wednesday. And so then it was Wednesday morning that we were up at the University of Iowa again, laying on that cold, sterile table. And I'll tell you, I was a medical device for almost 15 years. I was in a lot of surgeries, a lot of procedures. I've never, in my experience, seen that many people in a room, because it was the attending physicians, it was the medical students, it was the residents, it was the nursing staff, the techs. And there was a big screen up on the wall, and they had Beau projected up there, right? And they're talking amongst themselves. I'm crying. He's crying. Just going through everything that was wrong with him.
What were they able to tell you that day?
The only thing I remember, I don't know if you remember more, is when the doctor, I don't even know who she was, I still don't know who she was, turned and looked at us and said, "I'm really sorry, but the extent of these defects are incompatible with life." It's the only thing I remember.
Well, I'm not sure if the details matter when
No,
you hear
no.
those
Yeah.
words.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't do genetics, so but when they start talking about other malformations of feet and hands and things like that, it usually points to some underlying genetic defects. And so I don't think needed a diagnosis at that point.
I think the malformation of his skull, the fact that he was missing so much of his skull and that it appeared as if his brain was protruding out that opening, made it pretty obvious that he was not going to survive. And his heart would stop at some point. So for me, it just didn't, to do additional testing didn't really make any sense.
Looking back on it is how naive I think we are when we want to start a family, because of the conversations that we're lacking, the lack of knowledge of the statistics that 1 in 4 pregnancies ends in miscarriage. That would be helpful for families to know, I think, before. And, me being a scientist and knowing all the complexities of how hard it is to develop, I know the deepest nerdy stuff of development, and it's extremely complicated.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating, but a small thing could go wrong at any point, and I should have known better. And so it was kind of interesting to realize like how shocked I was by the whole experience. Like, why should I be shocked? I should be smarter. So I just remember that a lot, about really taking for granted. We're pregnant. We're having another baby.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a real learning experience, and a good one in the end.
Yeah, I think one of the things I remember most vividly about that day was being wheeled out of the hospital hollow.
Mm-hmm.
Going in pregnant and leaving hollow without a baby, right? And I couldn't bring him home with us. That's a real wake-up call. That we are not in control of this. So for somebody who always has a mission and a vision and, nothing's going to stop you, we'll stop you really quick. I would love to just share that the University of Iowa medical team, all of their staff were wonderful.
That's amazing.
Care can vary. Anything in any industry can vary. But our care was absolutely wonderful. And I'll never forget Dr. Hardy Fairbanks and Dr. Mawson looking at me later in a follow-up appointment and essentially saying, "Robin, you need to get pregnant again right away." And I was totally blown away by that, because, you're so used to hearing, "Oh, you need, your body needs to heal. You need to wait 3 months or 3 cycles," or whatever that needs to look like. And she said, "No, for your mental health, I'd like to see you get pregnant again right away," right? Because losing a baby, losing a child is such a helpless, hopeless feeling. And so that time waiting to be pregnant again is really difficult. So best advice I would say we were given. And fortunately for us, we were pregnant again 8 weeks later.
Oh, wow.
So Beau was delivered January of 2013. And then our rainbow baby, Ben, was delivered December of 13.
Wow, I didn't know his birthday was so close.
Yes, within the same year.
That is so special.
And actually, his due date was Christmas. Ben's due date was Christmas.
Beau did that.
He did. Merry Christmas, Mom.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I picked a really good one for you. Yeah.
Well, I didn't realize how soon that happened for you, but talk about balancing joy and grief. And we talk about this a lot at No Fit Too Small, but
Right.
you were grieving while celebrating a new baby.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like?
Well, before even getting to the grieving or celebrating was trying to survive that pregnancy. Because now you know what can go wrong. You know one thing that can go wrong. There's many other things that can go wrong.
Do you want to sign yourself up for that again?
And so just the fear that comes along with being pregnant the second time, third time. And I remember Ryan, we were laying in bed one night, and he said, Robin, what happened to Beau is akin to being struck by lightning, right? And trying to remember, like, okay, this likely won't happen again. It certainly can, but it likely won't. And my mom saying, and she had said this to me my entire life about everything, the things you worry about most generally don't happen, right? And so we couldn't waste our joy in fear or on fear. So,
and I think the doctors were on top of it, knowing that we had a miscarriage or a pregnancy loss. And so they were good in guiding additional supplements, folic acid supplements and things like that that are very strong in defending against neural tube defects, which is what Beau had, a neural tube defect. And so as simple as folic acid supplementation can help alleviate that fear of it happening again. And so, but yeah, it was definitely unnerving for months, I think, and unless we did earlier scans with Ben. I don't think we did. I think you wait around just long enough until you go do a gender check, and then you're hoping that
which
you're
we
not
now call
seeing
the
same
anatomy
thing.
scan. Now we're checking to make sure all the parts are there and they look the way they're supposed to look. Yeah, it's a very different experience.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, 12 years ago, things looked a lot different. Thanks to you guys, actually.
Well,
That's why we're here today, is all of the change that you've been able to help make because of Beau.
I hope so. I remember that decision, though, that first anatomy scan, and I thought, you know what, Abby was such a saint to walk alongside us in losing Beau and to be there for that scan. I want her to do this next scan, right? Again, alone in the office, all of the things, so that she can also end on a positive experience. So I was going in very hopeful, very optimistic that everything was going to be okay. And I really, at that point, had made it through the pregnancy pretty well without having too much fear. But we got in there, and I laid down, and Abby started scanning. The first thing we saw was Ben's skull, and immediately I was like, what's wrong with his head? What's wrong with his head? Right? And she's like, Robin, he's fine.
Oh.
He's perfect. And I'm like, oh, thank heavens. Yes. So he did have a rough delivery, though. Ben got stuck.
Ouch.
Yep, Ben was stuck. And another vivid memory I have is Dr. Mawson looking at me and with tears in her eyes and saying, Robin, we're not going to lose another one. Right? And then rushing to C-section to get him out. So
He just wanted a grand entrance.
good gravy.
It just highlights how much of a roller coaster it is. It's like you get past one hurdle and you take a little sigh, and then there's the next hurdle through the journey of pregnancy, and ultimately trying to just get to having your baby in your car heading home.
Yeah, and what did that feel like, taking Ben home after the year you had just had?
Tiring.
I was going to say, I think I was really tired, but just really grateful that he was finally there. I will say, when we first got home with Ben, again, he was born in December, so it's like cold flu season. I know a lot of stories again at this point, and I'm thinking, this kid cannot get sick, right? And so I remember keeping him in a bassinet in the living room and essentially not letting Bella come anywhere near him because she was at daycare, at least for those first few days, which in hindsight might have been silly, but it was, I am going to protect this little boy, right? Because I'm so grateful that he's even here. Yeah.
I don't blame you one bit.
No.
So I know it's probably easy now to think back, and, you talk so easily about how you were able to channel or not let fear take over. But I also know that that's not an easy mindset to adopt. So what do you think it was, both of you individually, that allowed you to be able to have that philosophy as you were navigating this?
Yeah, I think initially it definitely wasn't easy at all. I mean, I think we struggled. We probably took time off of work, all these things, right? And so I was lucky to have the person whose lab I was training in was very, obviously struck by what had happened as well, and just like, take as much time as you want. And so we definitely had time where there was a lot of doubt, and it wasn't easy at all at the time. But in the end, it's weird to look back and just be like, we were really lucky. We're really lucky. We were lucky. We were lucky to get pregnant so quick. We were lucky to have another boy because that's what we wanted. And so, like, all these little silver linings. And for us, it was a shorter window for sure until we got pregnant again. So it seemed short, but it was, I think, struggles for a little bit longer, of course. So it wasn't easy.
I can tell you what it was for me. I made the choice to bury my head in the sand. I really think that was my strategy. It was just, this can't happen again. I'm not going to think about this, right? Like, I'm not going to let that fear have headspace. It was just, I really think that was my mentality.
Yeah.
Right, wrong, or indifferent. And I do that in other aspects of my life too. Like, I'm just not going to think about that.
And we had switched pretty early on, I think, within days. I don't remember the exact timeline, but within days of delivering Beau and having his one footprint on that little white card, I think was, I don't know, there was just something that switched in us, or me, and I remember just being like, we have to share him somehow. He has to know, the world has to know that he existed. And so that, like, the little footprint, I remember just being fascinated looking at it, like, how lucky we were to even have that. We may have not gotten that had the nurse, whoever does that, went and gotten that for us. And that was great to have. And it was just such a sweet little footprint. I remember thinking, like, we got to photo this, perfect, and we got to share this. And then Robin had written the whole blog post, which is kind of, so it was almost as if we were switching towards this, not trying to hide this in darkness, but already immediately switching towards wanting to share Beau and turning things more towards a positive light if possible.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to ask you today was if you remember a specific moment when you realized Beau's story was going to be part of something bigger. And it sounds like that footprint maybe was one of those moments for you.
At the time, this is so embarrassing to even bring up because I go back and read these posts and they're terrible, but I had a food blog at the time, right? So again, I just think all of this was serendipitous. Like, it was just, I don't know, it was just meant to happen. But I had a food blog, and I had already posted about the gender check, right? I had posted this vote on social media. Are we going to have a boy or a girl? Right? And everybody was weighing in on whether or not it was a boy or a girl. And so when Beau wasn't able to come home, I very much felt compelled to share his story, right? It was no longer about the pink booties or the brown booties. It was like, gosh, how foolish were we to make the assumption that he was coming home, right? And so that is really what prompted me to write his story and to put it out there. I don't know in that moment that I thought, oh gosh, this is going to turn into something larger. It was just a mother's heart saying, this is his actual story, right?
Well, and I think there's nothing foolish about.
Well, you should be hopeful. You should hope
Yes.
that the baby's coming home. But in that moment, it did feel foolish. Like, gosh, Robin, like, how did you not consider that he might not come home? You just look at it differently once you buried one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I know, I love that you didn't envision it necessarily becoming what it is today, but No Foot Too Small started really around Beau's first birthday.
Yes.
Right? So let's talk about what you planned and how that kind of launched what we know No Foot Too Small as today.
So I am a gatherer by nature. I like bringing people together, hosting parties, cooking, doing all the things. And so one night I had said to Ryan, I think we should throw Beau a first birthday party. If he were here, we would do that. So why wouldn't we do that just because he lives in heaven? And Ryan agreed, like, yes, that sounds great. And he took it a step further as a scientist to say, well, if we're going to do that, then maybe we should raise money and donate it to science. Donate to research. Okay, great. So we start planning this event. It would be held at the University Club that fall. So we're having this conversation in like January, February, planning an event for September. And as we were having these conversations and planning the event, it just very much dawned on me again that nobody talks about pregnancy or infant loss. And so at the time, the Iowa City Moms blog was very popular. It may still be, but I was engaged in that community, and I thought, I'm going to write an article. I'm going to publish it in the Moms blog, and I'm going to welcome any family who's experienced any type of pregnancy or infant loss, from miscarriage to SIDS, everything in between, to join us. And so lo and behold, on that September evening, we welcomed 75 to 80 guests, and we celebrated 13 angels. There was one set of twins, and raised $10,000 that we gifted to the March of Dimes.
Wow.
Looking back, it is really entertaining to me that I was unwilling to even go to the microphone. Like, I was not going to say a word. I was not going to stand in front of the room. No way, Jose. So Ryan had to manage all of that. But my girlfriends showed up. They picked carnations out of the centerpieces. I mean, they just did anything and everything to really make this a special event, not just for Beau, but for all the families who were showing up. So, yeah, it was...
That was the start of the snowball.
I had no idea what I had just done.
What you had signed up
No,
for
I-
with that.
No.
I envisioned just a little dinner out with friends who may throw in some money, and then we could, hand a check over in Beau's honor and in his name, and then we'd go on from there. But Robin decided to go a little bigger.
Go big or go home.
That sounds like Robin. So did things happen quickly after that, or what happened after that event?
So that night, Stevie Bloomquist, actually, who is now also on our staff and has really walked alongside me for most of this journey, came up to me at the end of the night and had said, well, you're going to do this again, right? And I thought to myself, well, sure. I mean, I worked full-time for Medtronic. I had a career I loved, but I can host a party once a year. And so a few weeks later, I think I had called her, reached out to her and said, okay, I'm going to do this, but you're going to help, right? And so she obliged. She said yes. And for the next 2 years, we would host a very similar event. Every year it got a little bit bigger, but by the end of those 3 years, we had raised almost $100,000 and given it all to the March
Wow.
of Dimes. So there was certainly a need that we could sense that families were looking for a place to celebrate their angel. But I, at that point, really began wrestling with, the March of Dimes mission is incredibly important, and it's focused on science and research, but it is primarily around prematurity. And all of the families we were now serving, their babies are deceased, right? So what is it that we can do to serve them right now? And that was really kind of the light bulb moment for me, and the shift to forming our own entity of No Foot Too Small, formally.
Yeah, it's gone so fast. I was just sitting here thinking, it's like, do we even have video from the first gala? It wasn't called a gala back then, but
The No
it
Foot Too Small
would just be
benefit.
fun to go back in time and be able to see that first event again. I remember it actually being a pretty good event for the first go of it.
We even had an auction.
Yeah, there was an auction.
We had no idea.
I
what
had
we were
more
doing.
mic time than I get these days because Robin didn't want to go up there. So I remember stumbling through 3 pages of a speech, I think.
You couldn't even read it.
Yeah, my eyes are not the best. That's when I think I first knew that things were going south there.
Was that event called, did you name it No Foot Too Small?
Yes.
That very first one.
But it was
the
a No Foot Too Small benefit.
Okay.
And so what had really resonated with me after losing Beau, again, because all we had was this little footprint, was there is no foot too small that it cannot leave an imprint on this world. And so it was really from that I took No Foot Too Small. And that was the benefit.
So you start wrestling a few years later with, what are we going to do with this?
Right.
Do you go to Ryan and present an idea to him? What does that conversation look like when you are deciding what comes next?
Oh, I don't think I went to him.
It's usually just one-offs of ideas and,
Yeah.
So there wasn't one moment where you were like,
well,
this is the idea I have.
We talk about hosting that event, right? But just like we're learning today, the most important work we were actually doing was all of the one-on-one contact I was having with families. So I just joked the other day, I was the original 𝘍𝘰𝘂 angel ambassador, right? So I was going to every lost family's home, just like Allie Moss would share, our director of family support. She was one of those first families. Show up on their doorstep, take photos with their footprints, take them to coffee, listen to their stories, do all of those things. That was the most important work. But in that time, I was hearing a lot of stories. And so when it came to that point where I thought, gosh, we can't just keep raising money and donating it to the March of Dimes. We need to do something for these families. That's when it had dawned on me that why don't we in the United States have birthing and bereavement suites? Why don't we have a sacred special place for families who don't get to bring their babies home, right? That experience should look much different. And so it was in that moment that I then reached out to Dr. Mawson again. Hey, I have an idea. She so kindly met me for coffee, and I pitched it, and she looked at me and said, you know what? We need that here. I really expected her to say, that's special, Robin, but we're at 108% capacity, because they also were. But she said, no, we need that here, and immediately put me in touch with Dale, who was the administrator of 𝘱𝘰𝘰𝘵 at the time. That was the shift. Then it was, okay, we're going to continue to celebrate angels. We're going to continue to unite families at these events, but now we're also going to build birthing and bereavement suites. And that really, in that moment, defined the 3 pillars of the mission moving forward.
So when was the formal moment of becoming
so that
a
shift
nonprofit
happened in 2017. So 14, 15, 16 into 17. We were under the fiscal agency of the Community Foundation of Johnson County, so they managed all the money, did all of that. Shirley Fleeler was my contact there. I love her. But one day I walked in, and she looked at me and she said, Robin, you are our largest account here. Like, it is time for you to file your own 501c3. So I immediately started crying and walked out, and I called Stevie. And Stevie's like, it's fine, Robin. We're going to figure this out. I said, okay. So, that having already been established for several years, applying for a 501c is a much longer process. It's no longer just a 3-page document. So I got John Landon, our attorney, involved, and off we went. So it was 2018 before all of that was final, and we were our own 501c3.
And then you had to make the decision.
Well, so then we continued to grow. I was challenged by some in the community that we should be doing more than just the gala. Like, what else could we be doing to serve families? Leighton, again, suggested the Hot Moms Run, and I immediately was like, no, I don't think that's it. But I had looked at Bella one day in the backyard because she's like, Mom, why does Beau get to have so many parties? I'm like, well, he doesn't, honey. He gets to have one a year. He gets to have a birthday party just like you do. And she said, well, why don't I get to go to Beau's birthday party? And I was like, oh. So in that time, we added Blooms and Butterflies, right, and other events. And just, again, every year, growth upon growth upon growth. And it was really by the end of 2019 that I looked at Ryan and I said, I'm on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Like, at this point, I have 2 full-time jobs. I was 100% volunteer for 𝘍𝘰𝘂 for 6 years, never took a cent. But I just couldn't do it anymore. It was just too much. And so I'll still cry talking about that decision because I loved my career. But at that point, I had to choose between, a really hefty paycheck or the calling of my heart. And there was only one decision. So Christmas of 2019, I resigned from Medtronic. January 2020, I walked through the doors of 𝘍𝘰𝘂 for the first time as paid staff. Fun fact, I was not the first paid staff. I actually brought on Stacy from the March of Dimes first. And 3 months later, the pandemic hit. And that's how that went.
And Stacy's still here.
Stacy's still here.
Today.
Stevie's still here. Allie's still here. Yeah.
Well, it says a lot when you were able to basically start everything few months before a global pandemic, and we're still here today talking about immense success since then. So,
well, I appreciate that.
Says a
But
lot.
I have to say, I do think that really speaks to the need, right? You look back on 2020 and 21, and we still saw tremendous growth in those years. And I think anybody on the team would say it is because loss doesn't stop, right? There's not going to be a cure for miscarriage, stillbirth, you name it. And so it doesn't matter what's going on in the rest of the world. Families are still losing babies. They're still grieving. And that's why I think so many of them fall back on No for Too Small.
Yeah. At a rate that you can't keep up with. I think that's the challenge.
what are you both most proud of since, officially founding the organization? If we look at the last, even since 2013, but really with No Foot Too Small, what are you most proud of?
Proud of the ability just to keep up with it all. Proud of Robin for taking a leap, really, because she was doing fine with Medtronic, but I always kind of looked at it as, you're getting a nice paycheck, but you're selling bone graft for the man, up the big man on top.
I enjoyed it.
You had a lot of flexibility for sure, but I always looked at it and just thought that it wasn't a career with purpose and passion, and I could sense that in her for sure. And so now having seen what she was able to do in this, I think is, I'm proud of her for taking that leap and then following through with it, which is not easy. Like she's saying, it's just growing and growing and growing. It becomes more and more work, and it's, you're already running a family. I run a research lab. We're both basically running our own little enterprises and then trying to manage a family. So it's a lot of juggling. So I'd just say, proud to even get through it. And but really land in spots where we're both passionate about our careers and keep fighting and keep growing it.
I would say there's two things I'm most proud of. First would just be the No for Too Small community. And by that I mean all of the families who've leaned in and trusted us. So proud of them, of our staff, of our volunteers. Like, the community is something special, and that is priceless. The other thing I'm super proud of is the lesson it's teaching our kids, right? Not just about compassion, about pregnancy and infant loss, about how to be a good human, but also how to work hard. They see me working all the time. And I would say nobody is more proud of No for Too Small than Ben. And that is the coolest thing to watch. Like, I just asked him again not too long, like, hey, buddy, what are you going to be when you grow up? He's 11 years old. He's like, I'm going to run No Foot Too Small. I'm like, oh, sure. Sure you are. Yeah, that's what
what the team has accomplished. You just look at No Foot Too Small today, and it's just incredible. Everything that the team thinks about, and branding and all this stuff, and it's funny to think it's like it's pregnancy loss. We need to brand this, but like they do everything to a level that I think is above most people's expectations, and I think that's why it's so well received. It's colorful. It's celebrating. They just really put a lot of thought into making sure every event is perfect, and I think it's
easy for anybody on the outside to give me credit for it, because for 12 years I've served as the face of No Foot Too Small, right? But this is a team effort, and there's no way No Foot Too Small would be what it is today without everybody, including you, who have leaned in since the beginning, right? And bringing expertise and knowledge that I don't have to serve families the best way possible.
And I think what is most beautiful is really that team is united because of Angels and because of loss. And, we've made something really beautiful out of one of the worst things, maybe the worst thing we could experience. And so that to me is what makes it extra special. And I agree with you that on the outside things look like they go off without a hit. But now that I've had the insider view, it's there's a lot that goes on. So
I would say Ryan did hit the nail on the head, though, in that it is a different ball game when you're working on something you're passionate about, right? That purpose-driven path is just a really special one. So while you make sacrifices, I'll always say, I've never worked harder in my entire life, but I've never been more fulfilled in my entire life.
So what's the next dream for No Foot Too Small?
The next dream would be some additional revenue streams. The next dream. It is difficult to keep up with funding when we have such a big vision for serving families around the country. So I joke, but I am serious. But what's next is just continuing to serve families in a very personal, meaningful way. The last thing I want for No Foot Too Small is for us to grow to a place where it's automated emails, right? Or there isn't the personal connection. Because again, I think that's what makes the community so special.
Yeah, which also makes it hard to scale, so the dream is scaling this thing, but to do it right and do it with the care that the team always wants to put into everything and not let it get out of hand and lose the special thing that it is, I guess. That's the challenge. So I think if a dream would be a big endowment fund or something to take a little pressure off of the fundraising, because I think the fundraising is, it takes a lot, and it'd be great if there was a little more support there that would free them up to really focus on the mission and keep serving all the families that keep coming our way.
Yeah, and you've highlighted a little bit about what makes us unique and different for families, but what would you want families who are maybe listening to this and learning about No Foot Too Small for the first time to know about who we are and what we do?
The most important thing I could say to any family who's watching, listening, following along on social media is that you are welcome here, right? It doesn't matter what your lost story is. We don't compare stories. They're all welcome here. And that has been true since the very beginning. I remember when Stevie responded to my article in the Iowa City Moms blog. She sent an email and she asked if Claire belonged, if that story belonged, because Claire was a full-term stillborn, right? And so while our loss was different, yes, she was absolutely welcome here. So again, early miscarriage, SIDS, everything in between, everybody's welcome here.
Including men.
You the same thing as well. So I think that hesitation hasn't changed, and there's a lot of families wondering where their story fits. So
absolutely,
it's important.
And I would say dads too.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Men. That's, I think, what makes the organization unique now is obviously a lot of people thought this initially was a conversation for moms, and it started as the moms blog, and so there's been a lot of dads getting involved and really stepping up into leadership roles, wanting to run dad support groups and things that are, I think, very unique. And the dads need support as well. We like to play a little golf too. And but yeah, I think everyone's welcome, and it's awesome to see everyone join in and lean in, knowing that they're not alone.
Well, one of my favorite things that you do is the letters that you write to Beau and that he writes to you. And so I want to ask you if you could have a conversation with Beau right now. What do you think he would say, and what would you want to say just about where we're at as an organization?
I mean, I would have to read all those letters, right? I mean, those are basically my conversations in my own head with him about somehow developing a relationship with him in a way to keep him, we celebrate him every year, but every year I want to kind of build on that and not just be a show up to gala and this one's for Beau type of thing. So I kind of wanted to deepen a relationship if possible, albeit it, like I said, this year it exists solely in my head, seemingly, and in my heart as well. But I mostly just tell him that I'm super thankful for what he's done, how he's changed my life. Very grateful for the way things turned out, and we wouldn't be where we're at. I wouldn't have learned a lot about, how to deal with grief and balance it with joy. None of everything I've learned in the past decade plus. It's all because of Beau. So usually just a lot of thanks.
It's beautiful.
I love you, buddy. That's what I would say.
And say hi to Papa.
Yeah. Gosh, let's not go there. Yeah. Hopefully he's having a hell of a time with Grandpa.
Oh, I have no doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, if he inspired the parties we're having here, I can't even imagine the parties that are happening with the two of them. It's special to think about.
They're having a ball.
Well, thank you both for being
you.
here with us. Is there anything else that you'd like our community to know, or how can they find us?
Oh, gosh, there's so many great ways to find us. I don't know if I'm just really old, but my favorite is still Facebook. So finding us on social media for sure. So Facebook, Instagram, certainly on the website. But please know that if you reach out on any of those platforms, it will be a real human, another lost family responding to you. And that will always be really important to us.
I can attest to that. I respond to the social media messages, so it's me.
Yeah.
Or Robin if she's
or when it
in.
comes in through the database, right? It is Allie and our family support team, 𝘱𝘰𝘰𝘵 and Christine. So it's all very personal.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Jackie.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for letting me sniffle and cry. And I learned we need to have Kleenex on the set.
I was thinking about that because
One missed detail.
Katie had beautiful tissues that she handed me at gala this year. So, I have to say gala, like all of you. I can't have my Britishness come out, but
No, we love it.
yeah, we'll have to add that to the set.
Yes.
Lesson learned. Thank you for joining us today for this special first episode of the No Foot Too Small podcast. Thank you again to Ryan and Robin for their time and sharing their story. Please share today's episode if it resonated with you. This is our first one, so we'd love to get the news out that we are doing this. And if you are someone who is currently experiencing pregnancy or infant loss, we would love to meet you. We would love to spend time with you. Please reach out to us at nofoot2small.org. And if you're interested in supporting our mission, there is a donate page at nofoot2small.org. You can find all of the links that you need in our show notes. Thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you at the next episode.